First, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to participate in the Michigan State University Extension Conference. Being a native of the state of Michigan is especially meaningful to me. Engaged Networks enables organizations in both business and government to leverage the power of their customers, partners, and employees through listening for really good ideas that enable companies to drive new sources of revenue, but in government and education to drive solution possibilities to policy problems, to develop institutional memories that we can learn from, all through networks. As we all know, every business and every government is working with tight budgets and constrained resources, yet at the same time they're being asked to drive more revenue, to drive growth, to provide the same or increasing levels of services to their stakeholders, their customers, their partners, their employees, in the case of government, their citizens. And so the really big thing that's happening is that both business and government are turning to the power of their networks. In other words, the ideas of their customers, partners, employees, and citizens, and they're involving them, they're engaging them in their business processes. In the world of business, that's known as social commerce, and in the world of government, it might be thought of as Gov2O. Most people, when they think of networks, probably think of social portals like Facebook, and that social portals have the purpose of creating friends and connections between friends, but the opportunity that we have with networks is so much larger. Networks are not destinations. Networks are combinations of experiences that we have in our everyday lives. As we go through our day, we have our networks of our friends, our families, our work environment, might be our professional networks. We have many networks that we experience in many different ways. And so the way we want to think about networks is very simple. There are three elements: people, connection, and exchange. And so the more people with the greater amount of connection and the more exchange that we have, the more value we can create within networks, not simply to make friends, but to create value through the information sharing and the idea sharing and the discovery of new ways of doing things. Oftentimes when we think about building networks or supporting networks, we think about technology first. But networks are not inherently a technology problem or a challenge. They're a behavioral challenge. They're a human challenge. Networks are about human beings and how we interact with each other, how we share communication, how we take that communication and create value from it. The technology only supports the communication that takes place. Organizations in both business and government often struggle with how to be effective in the use of networks. And that seems strange because it's something that oftentimes most organizations do very naturally. We build networks of our customers, our partners, our employees, and in the case of government, our citizens. But it's not always apparent how to support those with technology or to accelerate the communication across networks when we have the availability of online tools. And so what we've done is to define a model, and we call it the network competency model, that helps organizations understand very simply how to get the most out of their networks. There are four elements that will help every organization blueprint their involvement in and support for networks to get to the point of result. And so the four elements in the model are the following. First, every organization should start with a clearly defined purpose or a result that they want to achieve as a result of the network or use of the network. And common results in business would be to drive more revenue. In government, it might be to develop an institutional memory or to create solution possibilities that we didn't know existed by if we had not involved our stakeholders. So our stakeholders are going to give us ideas, give us possibilities to solve these really big problems that build upon each other to get to the point of results. So the first element is having a well-defined sense of what we want to accomplish with the implementation of a network or a series of network experiences. The second element is to have a well-defined sense of what the organizational investment is going to be or is required to be successful in use of networks. So oftentimes organizations and business and government both will just stand networks up in a technology sense and assume that because they have the technology that the network is somehow going to create value. That's not really how it works. So organizations have to have a very clear sense not only of what their financial investments are, but also their behavioral investments. How much content are they going to contribute to a network? What people are going to manage a network? How are they going to address emergent outcomes in the network? All of those are important and many other considerations, but there has to be a well-defined sense of the investment required to be able to implement a network. The third element of the network competency model is to have a well-defined sense of the behavior or the network conditions that must be present, the combination of experiences that you would provide to participants in the network, whether they're customers, partners, employees, or citizens. And so there, the way we want to think about that is maybe using the metaphor of a kaleidoscope. We can modulate or we can dial in or combine different experiences that those stakeholders might have to get to the point of results. So some networks are sustainable for over a long period of time, but some are very episodic. In other words, they take place only in a very short period of time and require less involvement. We have to consider social fear that people have as citizens to their participation in networks. We want to consider trust and how do we build trust and what combinations of behavior help us build that trust. We want to always understand the role of content in the network, but also the participation or user-generated content that a member or participant might generate. So all of those combinations of experiences are very important. And finally, the fourth element is often overlooked, but probably the most important. What's the value proposition to the participant in the network? And whether it's a customer, partner, employee, or citizen, what's in it for them? What are they achieving out of the network? None of us have a lot of time to participate in networks, and we're very busy. We have a lot of things to do, a lot of demands on our time. So having one more thing to do is often very difficult. They'll either join a network or contribute it for recognition. It's the most powerful emotion in the world. We all like to be heard. We will often join a network for some type of monetary remuneration because it's going to make a financial difference in our lives. Or finally, we will join networks to make connections with others and oftentimes to build reference goods. So in other words, we'll rely upon the opinions of others in which we make decisions. We're 30 times more likely to listen to the opinions of our peers than we are any message. So all of those four elements, if properly and thoughtfully considered, will help organizations in how they might implement networks and create value from networks. Number one, the world is changing in a really big way, and one that affects each and every one of us every day. It affects our economic livelihoods, it affects our personal livelihoods, and it affects the way in which we govern ourselves as a society. To be competitive as a state, as a region, as a government, in business, we have to listen to our stakeholders, our customers, partners, employees, and in the case of government, our citizens. Those organizations that do listen and do involve their stakeholders are the organizations that are going to be most competitive in this century and beyond. Number two, to be effective in the use of networks and in leading this transformation and responding to the disruption, we all have to be very thoughtful to be effective. We have to be thoughtful in the way that we think about networks and how we construct the communication in networks and how we fully leverage networks, and we embrace that change. And finally, Michigan and Michigan State University are in a very unique position to lead the change and the transformation, the disruption that is taking place in the world. The citizens in Michigan and the wonderful educational institutions that exist both throughout the state are incredible assets that can be leveraged with the power of networks. Over the course of the last 12 months, the state of Michigan, Michigan State University, and Engaged Networks have developed a strategic partnership. The purpose of the partnership is to help state agencies and the universities and even private business to understand how to fully leverage networks and to really create a cutting-edge, state-of-the-art resource in how we actually implement networks to affect change. And this partnership is a first of its kind in the country and perhaps in the world, and we expect to be able to do really big things. So that resource resides right here in the state of Michigan, and several of our major first projects are with the School of Agriculture.